We are waiting on Nicole attendees, so hopefully she's here in a minute. Give her a chance to get this thing on Facebook.
Wait, there she's at. She's there. She just popped up. Yay!
Oh. Can you hear me?
Hey. Yeah, we can hear you.
Yay, brilliant. I am almost home. There was an accident on the road on the way home, so I'm running a wee bit behind, but I'll be home shortly, and there will be video. But we can do audio now. You tell me if it sounds good.
Yeah,
it sounds okay. I mean, we don't want to contribute to distracted driving accidents, though.
I am hands-free as is proper because I'm always a safety-first person.
Now, but how are you supposed to taste the whiskey while you're doing this?
I am 0% going to be tasting the whiskey while driving. Yeah.
Wait, it's Tennessee. Can't you do anything you want in Tennessee?
The rules do seem to be pretty lax. I'll grant you that. They're not like a rules state.
So
how are you guys doing?
We're good. How you been it's been what it's been? Maybe 10 months since we spoke to you last?
I know, it's been a minute. I'm actually super excited. I got my first vaccine shot today. That's what I'm driving back from right now.
Nice.
Fantastic.
Congratulations. Very happy about that. I'm like just so delighted. I'm sure it's the same for you, Brett. I'm like constant state of fear that I would lose my sense of smell.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I'm actually getting mine. I finally won the Cook County game, and so I'm getting my first one tomorrow.
Oh,
Being I think the last Binny's employee, because everybody else in the world managed to get their vaccine except for me.
I know. I drove almost 3 hours today because there's like one county in Tennessee that's open to my group.
Really?
And so I was like, I'm going.
I'm surprised you didn't. I'm surprised because I know like Farber in California, for instance, was able through agriculture.
So me as well, but Tennessee is so slow. We're tied for last in the country in percent of our population vaccinated. Like they're still on phase 1, except in this one county, which I drove to today. So, which is why, and I apologize, I hate to be like late for these things, but
it's all right. Getting vaccinated is important. We're understanding.
Yeah, I was like too excited to miss the opportunity. So
yeah, 100%. No, 100%. You can't miss that.
Well, I'm almost home. So we're podcasting today. Is that right?
We're Zoom webinaring today.
Okay.
So we won't. Whatever. The old guys who work for the distributors call everything a podcast now. Whether it's a Facebook tasting or an actual podcast or a commercial shoot, it's like, oh, you get them for a podcast.
I will not tell them you said that.
Oh, half of them, well, a few of them, if they could figure out how to actually get their phone to work, are probably watching. But that's okay. So you know what? Well, why don't we, because we're kind of, we obviously want to talk about, you know, what might be coming up for Bottled and Bond and the new 15. But what have you been working on since we talked to you last? I believe last April or May.
Oh boy, I mean, so much. Like, you know, when you leave me alone in the distillery for like a whole year and I don't have to travel, I can concoct all sorts of ideas.
Fantastic.
So yeah, I've got all sorts of stuff coming. I'm like thinking in my head exactly how much I can say, but we're continuing the Cascade Moon, which of course I think I released both of those since last time we talked, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think those are out. I've got another Bottled and Bond coming. We've got a big exciting whiskey release coming in June. I've got some more Cascade Moons planned that should be delightfully weird. And then finally, actually, hopefully sometime in the middle of next year, we'll start to see the first whiskey releases that I like actually distilled.
Nice.
So that's going to be quite exciting. Yeah.
That's a point of pride for you for sure then.
It will be. Yeah, it will be. It'll be really nice. I mean, I love blending. I love talking about blending. I love educating people about why that stuff matters in American whiskey. But, you know, ultimately, like you want to, I'm a control freak. I want to touch every part of the process, you know?
Sure. Sure. Well, your background. So how long? What does that mark for your tenure at Dickel?
That'll be 3 years. I think, yeah.
Okay.
I came in March of 2018. So yeah, I'm 3 years.
Nice.
Okay. Well, it's fun. Well, we're enjoying. I know that we've gotten some extra shots at some single barrels this year, which we are very excited about. Our customers are obviously excited enough that they have about a 30-second shelf life before they're in somebody's cart going someplace
I
new.
love
We're
to
looking.
hear that. I love that.
Yeah, we're looking forward to getting down and possibly at some point in time, once everybody's vaccinated up, doing some picks. Are you gonna? You've been doing a lot of 9 years. Are there anything coming where you're maybe changing ages on that program?
Yes, yes, there are. Funny you should ask. I believe you will have many of the 15-year-old single barrel, which is a new program that I am very excited about. Some folks who have been maybe like longtime Dickel enthusiasts might remember that we used to have a 14-year-old single barrel program.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
yeah, yes, right, yes.
Yes.
Some
yeah.
people remember that. I think I was getting asked about that from probably the first day that I started. And, you know, it took a while to get just the logistics and all the, single barrel programs are complicated. Like pulling one barrel out of the warehouse and genuinely running it as a true single barrel program where like one barrel is dumped into one tank and then bottled, and not mixed with anything else. Like those are hard. They're hard to do and they take a while, and then like getting them to the right warehouse, to the right retailer. So we had to sort all that bit out. But now I'm very excited to kind of have that sorted in a way that I can now put some older whiskeys out in the single barrel program. And I was contemplating like, well, bringing back just the 14-year, because I know people remembered it, but looking out in like at what was available, the oldest single barrel program seemed to be 15-year-old. So I was like, well, why not? I've got it. Let's do it. So that was how 15-year-old.
And then we're hoping too, because a lot of people I think people don't understand, and we talked about it the last time we talked, people don't understand about the versatility of Dickel and the amount of things that what you do. I think if people get locked into black label, white label,
yes,
they don't understand that you guys are, I would guess, by a long shot, the largest producer of bourbon in Tennessee. And you also make some really tasty rye. And curious if there's anything else coming under those umbrellas.
I think you're exactly right that like, a lot of people think they already know Dickel, like if they've tasted Dickel 12, if they've had that white label, that, and that is a very bold and very kind of polarizing liquid, right? So it's a real whiskey drinker's whiskey. So you kind of tend to love it or hate it. And I think a lot of folks, that colored their expectations of everything that we produce at the distillery, without kind of maybe fully understanding that those taste that way through a very conscious, purposeful, and frankly, pretty onerous blending process to get them to taste that way. And that, we can do other things. We have whiskeys that don't taste like that. And I think that's something that people see when they see the barrel program, and that it's like I think it surprises a lot of people, to realize the versatility of our whiskeys and like what we have, and that maybe opens our eyes to like the capacity of what this distillery can produce. And that was my hope with the single barrel program, to like introduce people to these high quality whiskeys, like in a little bit in the same way as bottled and bond. But even bottled and bond, I was trying not to go out too far, like I didn't want to flip over the whole table, with the first new whiskey that I released and be like, here's something completely different, because you have to respect the heritage, of this 150-year-old brand that you've just taken over. So even bottled and bond, there's an element of that kind of what I would call that like waxy fruit, slightly vitamin-y character that some people can find a bit polarizing, and there's certainly a lot of oak structure. Whereas with the single barrel, I think you can step a little farther away, and that's part of what's interesting about it. So I'm hoping people try it and are like pleasantly surprised, like, oh, I didn't know that Cascade Hollow could make whiskeys like this. And then maybe it opens their mind to other things that will be coming out soon.
Nice.
No, that's good. And that sort of, you just encapsulated, I think, what we try to do with our single barrel program with any distillery, which is, I think sometimes people get the perception that you do barrels just because you want to show off. And for us, we obviously want to show off that our friends let us buy really, really wonderful barrels of whiskey. But another big piece of it is that it doesn't do any good because the single barrel is fleeting, right? You're going to get a limited amount of bottles, and it's going to come and it's going to go. But whatever it was that provided the name that drew people to try the single barrel is still going to exist on the shelf. And so we've always tried to frame our single barrel program in, a chance to try the best of the best from somebody that we're going to be working with on a consistent basis. So, Well,
and I think you hit the nail on the head of like, if the single barrel, if it tastes exactly the same as the thing that's already on the shelf for half the price, then what are you doing? Like,
right.
It's, like, because single barrels they're just logistically complicated. They're always going to be more expensive no matter what you do. And so why, like, to me, there's no point unless they're at least a little bit interesting or different or, distinct in some way. And then that's what makes it fun and gives you that feeling of like, well, this is rare whiskey,
Yeah, no, 100%, 100%. So that's what we're definitely looking forward to that, because you see, it's funny, you're getting your distillery there. We've got a couple of independents out there that have sort of whetted everybody's appetite for what we know is potentially coming, because of some of that older stuff.
Well, that's delightful.
So, and we figure, it's always, it's, the independents are great, but you not that there's any pressure, but of course you have to go out there, and if you're going to be from the home source, you've got to beat all the independents.
Yes. No, I feel that pressure. Yeah. Thanks for that. No, I am extraordinarily conscious of that. And I am also, I've already been through the ringer. Like, imagine the paranoia when I was trying to blend the sequel to the whiskey of the year. Like,
sure. Oh yeah. 100%. Yeah. No, you're right.
So,
you're right.
I've already been through the ringer with that paranoia.
So welcome, Nicole. Welcome.
I know. I'm here officially. I am not driving anymore. I can look at your lovely faces. How are you?
Real quick, my Loyola Ramblers just beat Georgia Tech 71-60, so we can get on with the tasting now. I've turned my television off.
So,
they crushed them.
Yeah, it was a tight game back and forth. All right.
So you weren't the only one who was doing something else just there.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, see, you didn't see him because you couldn't see the whole fact that he figures that we don't have our guest within sight, so he was blatantly and openly watching the game whilst not really talking a whole lot.
I was paying attention. The game was muted, at least. So welcome everyone back to another virtual tasting with Benny's. I'm Pat, along with Brett and Joe from the Whiskey Hotline. Nicole, welcome back. I wasn't around when you tasted last time with us. I think I was on a canoe trip or something. But thank you for taking the time to join us today. We're pretty excited about this 15-year-old single barrel that is kind of suspiciously a third of the price of other 15-year-olds that people spend way too much time trying to hunt down. So let's break this down a bit.
I'm delighted to be able to offer it to you.
So one of the first questions we got here was, how did you get the outturn you did for these single barrels, meaning like seemingly the bottle size is monstrous for a single barrel? Anonymous asked this, so I'm not quite sure what you're getting at. I don't have the bottle in front of me. If Brett or Joe does it have like some.
Oh, I think the question was they were curious. They were curious if there was what size were the barrels, I believe was actually the question, which is
a good question because there's 378 378, like the number bottle on this thing
You
here.
realize the
So-
possibility exists that more than one single barrel was dumped. I'm just throwing that out there.
No, okay, I understand the question now. I understand the
Okay.
question. So I see they're looking at the bottle numbers
That's
on
right.
the label. And so the bottle numbers, the way that they work on the labels is we don't start at 1 at the beginning of every individual barrel.
Because that
So,
would make sense.
well, no, it would not make sense because then you'd end up throwing away a ton of labels. Like, because you don't know how much they're going to yield. So,
Okay.
right. So like if you're dumping a bunch of barrels, so like let's say we're getting ready because we pick it all at once, right? So like I pick all of the single barrels and they get bottled before anyone buys them, which is part of why we can actually get it to you in like weeks instead of a year. So they're all kind of pre-screened, and when we're bottling, so the whiskey does not mix with any other barrel, right? The whiskey is fully segregated. But from a labeling perspective, what we didn't want was the same bottle number to be repeated inside one barrel,
Oh, okay.
right? So they don't all start at 1. So like you dump the first barrel and it starts at 1, and let's say you get 10 cases out of that, then so that's what, 120 bottles. So the next barrel is going to have bottle number 121, right?
Okay.
And you'll keep going, and then we have numbers. I think it goes up to 500 because you don't want to like repeat, right? So it had to be big enough that we were confident that you would never repeat a number on the same barrel. So that if you just tried to order them like a roll of labels and you started at 1 every time, you'd end up throwing away a ton, because some barrels only yield like maybe 3 or 4 cases, if they've leaked, or there's a wide range in what the barrels yield. So it's sort of how to make sure that you like have independent bottles on your single barrel, but do it in a way that doesn't involve like wasting a ton of paper.
Okay. That makes sense. I mean, so barrel size standard
Yes.
53 gallon.
It's a
ASP,
standard
of course.
53 gallon barrel, and they yields very widely. So on the low side, we have some that are like 3, 4, 5 cases. On the high side, like 14, 15, sometimes 16. So that's typically the range.
We just picked some 9-year barrels, which kind of ranged, I want to say, from 9 to 11 year last week or the week before. And
I've got your very samples right here.
yeah, there we go. And we got a spreadsheet emailed to us with barrel yields that I don't have in front of me, but I want to say a couple of them were single digit yields as well.
Yeah, it definitely can happen. Some of it's angel share, or even just if it leaks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Cool.
Or if they've been sampled a ton.
Yeah,
that can also
here
happen.
here gave Tim. So if Tim Carr blows you up, I texted him. Is our local breakthrough rep. Yeah, we had as low as 4. We had it looks like 2010 E, A, B, C, D, E. So it looks like a May 2010 barrel only yielded 4 cases.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes it's because they've been sampled a ton. They could have leaked.
That means they're the tasty ones, for sure.
Sometimes, or it just means that they're the one that's at the end of the row. So every time I send the guys in, they just go for the one closest to them and pull
Right. So it's been heavily quality controlled.
It's possible.
All right. So the follow-up question from Colin was, why is there different proofing amongst the 15-year single barrels? Because they're all single barrels and they're bottled at their actual proof, right?
No. So,
No.
Well, close, right? It's a good question. So I would not, there's a reason that I didn't call them cask strength or barrel proof, because they are not in fact bottled at exactly their proof. So again, it's sort of the practicalities of trying to deliver the best possible whiskey, but doing it at scale for a reasonable price. So like similar logic as the digitally printed bottle numbers is the proofs. So at this age, we see a wide range of proofs when we're pulling them out of the ricks, right? So we did a proof study when I was thinking about doing this program, and some of them are in the low 100s and some of them were going down like all the way into the 80s. And what I didn't want, if I had just had to pick one proof, you would have had to go with the low one, right? Because you can add water, but you can't raise the proof of a barrel once you've dumped it. And to me, it just seemed like a real shame to be diluting like ones that would have come out of the barrel at, 103 down by 20 proof points. So the solve for that to me was to get a variety of proofs. I believe I can't remember if I did 5 or 6. I think I did 6 for a 15-year-old. And actually come next year, we'll have 3 different proofs for 9-year-old for the exact same reason, because we're starting to see some, sometimes I throw a 12 or 13-year-old in the 9-year-old program, and some of those can get pretty low. And so basically the proof that we select is like the closest. It's like the opposite of Price is Right rules. It's like closest without going over, like, so if the barrel dumps at 103, you pick the like lowest, the proof that's closest to that, to bottle it out. So we're trying to minimally dilute. So it's not a true cask strength because I did add water, like there may be some minimal dilution. So that's why we don't call it that. But that's why there's the variety.
Yeah, and that's sensible. I mean, and quite frankly, there are a number of programs that do that. Knob Creek barrels are bottled at 120 because they know
and there's
that
just no way that they all got dumped at exactly that,
Right. But they know that things are safely going to be at or above 120, and so whatever they have to do again is not much.
And we go in at 115, right, for these ages. Right. So you're starting from a lower point to begin with, which I think is part of why some of them can still be so like soft and balanced at 15 years old. But then you add the complexity of our sort of single style warehouses, which I've seen have a tendency to drop proof over time. So you can go in at 115 and come out at 84.
Wow.
So that's why.
So I was going to ask that. I mean, you see a lot of proof drops, and you said the warehouses are single story?
For this age, so we have single story warehouses, and then we have some more traditional palletized warehouses. Okay. And in these types of rickhouses, we have seen a lot that have a tendency to go down over time. And you can kind of almost think of it like as the first floor of a Kentucky rickhouse, Yeah.
Do you find it's interesting because we know, is there a correlation strictly related to the proof and flavor or profile?
It's a thoughtful question. So I would say generally, yes. Okay. However, with a giant asterisk on top of it, that you always find ones that are surprising to you. Right. Like it's such a wide variety that probably, like, if you plotted them on a flavor map, there would be like clusters that are related, but they would still be so all over the place that it would be really hard to discern a pattern. So like, I don't think as a customer, like if you see a single barrel and it's, in the 80s instead of in the hundreds, that there's no assumption that you can make that is reliable. Right. Like, I wouldn't say the one in the 80s is probably going to be like vanilla-y and soft, and the one in the hundreds will be like woody and harsh, because they are not. It's definitely not that simple. But I do think there are like something that distinguishes some of our older whiskeys. I think is actually they're surprisingly balanced for the age, and that sort of softness and balance, and I would say a little bit like kind of mellowness in your mouth. Which is a little bit odd for something that's 15 years old and a new cask, is more pronounced at the lower proofs.
Right. So that's kind of, because otherwise you wouldn't, it follows, it kind of, another distillery that has warehousing similar to yours is Four Roses. So it kind of follows, because remember, Four Roses are 6 barrels high?
6 barrels high.
Do they have some of those? Yeah, I wonder.
They have 100%. Yeah. That's their only storage, are single story 6 barrel tall ricks. That's it.
That's what we have. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Must
so
be the
sense.
Same builder.
Must be. I mean, it would be going back to the same era, like that sort of 70s. Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
So did you have so how did you? So here's the question: since we've talked about the variances you're going along, where do you start to be able to do a single barrel project like this, where by nature single barrels are going to be unique, but find that band? It's like striking that load of ore that is going to be close, so you don't have a great deal of variance from. I mean, that must have taken a while to strike that balance.
Well, I definitely accepted a fair bit of variance. So like the way that I structured the 15-year-old was while doing a very large mature whiskey inventory review. So like pulling thousands of samples, and you're doing the inventory review, and then blind assessing them. And as I'm assessing, you basically just put an asterisk by ones that you think would be appropriate for different things that you want to do. So like, I smell something that reminds me of Bottled and Bond, you take a note. If I smell something that I think this could be a single barrel, the quality criteria that I'm looking at is like, is this whiskey interesting to drink on its own, right? Like, is it balanced enough on its own? Is it complex enough on its own that you would want to drink it on its own? Like, to me, that's the criteria. So I was not overly worried about, does it match Dickel 12 or does it match the 9-year-old or does it, like, I wasn't trying to match it to something. I was trying to just kind of put an asterisk on the ones that I thought were of a high enough quality that you would want to drink them on their own. And then at the end of that process, I was like adding up how many of those I had and being like, okay, this is enough to support a program,
Right. Yeah, it's like when we judge, right? It's like when we judge. That's one of the BTI uses that protocol amongst the other ways to triangulate yourself are, would I like to get this as a gift? Would I buy it for a gift? Would I buy it for myself? Would this always be on my bar?
Right.
That sort of walking through, which is the only way to do it. It's interesting. There was a question that we just got, which is kind of on the Binny's single barrel program or the single barrel program in general. It was just asked, how are handpicks handled by Binny's? Are we getting leftovers? We're lucky, quite frankly, that so why don't you walk it until they come to Illinois? So how do you start a single barrel program for consumers and retailers?
So I start by picking the ones that I think are appropriate for a single barrel program, right? So kind of that initial like quality marker of, is this good enough to drink on its own, right? So that forms the like core of what you have available. And then typically it depends on the situation, but some of them you kind of know would be maybe like more appropriate for off premise. Some of them are more appropriate for on premise. Like, so you start to sort of sort them out that way. But I found like in doing tastings with folks with single barrel programs, people's tastes diverge like really dramatically. And like, so my goal is typically to present people with a variety so that you can pick the one that is the most appropriate for like you and your customer. Because I don't know your customer, you know your customer, like what you want and like what people want. So I try and present a variety so that you can pick the one that's like best for you. Some people love that powerful woody flavor, right? And like that's what they want. And like that's what all of their barrels are like, or some of them want those like honey casks that are like super vanilla-y and really pleasant and like would satisfy anyone, like some of them just want complexity. Some of them want the weirdest stuff they could possibly get their hands on, where they're like, oh my God, this whiskey smells like sausages. Like, can you believe it? And like, that's,
we want those barrels. Send us those.
Sausage whiskey. We haven't seen sausage whiskey yet.
It's funny. I'm thinking of it because there was one of these 15-year-olds that was like so unctuous and savory. It was just weird, and like some people love weird. So that's what I'm trying to do, to like give you at least enough of access to enough of variety that you can pick what makes sense for you.
Okay, so take it there. So Nicole does all that. She sends samples all over the country. Samples arrive in Chicago. Generally, because we've been participating in this program, certainly for the longest in Chicago, we end up getting, quite frankly, we usually get those samples first. So whatever comes to the market, we get a chance to go. And then on the Binny side, the vast majority of the tasting is done by Pat and Joe and I. We don't always agree. In fact, in certain cases, we rarely agree. And what ultimately gets picked to put on our shelves are the closest that we can come to consensus. And we actually talk about all the things that Nicole just said, all of them. It's like, okay, what are the merits? What are the pros and cons? Why do you want to defend this barrel? If we all agree, then it's pretty easy. It's like, okay, this is obviously something very good because we've all come together. If we disagree, then we each have to defend to each other, our pros and cons and what we want, and then, come to some level of agreement that ultimately that's going to be something that our customers are going to want to have. And when they buy it, they're going to say, I want to go back and buy another I want to go back and buy another hand pick. Right. That's
well, and ultimately, like you're putting your name on it, right? So it has to be something 100%. That you like. Like it's because the whole point of the single barrel program is it's your barrel. So like it's Binny's name on it. So it doesn't matter if I like it. You gotta like it.
Right. but it's been pre-screened. So that's as you kind of, and so we rarely see, although we will, if you do come up with a sausage barrel, you can just send, you can send the sausage barrel straight here to us.
Sometimes I'm like, what is this? Like, that's when you like go start smelling your own hand or something to be like, did I eat like a, what did I do?
Exactly. It's like, give me some coffee grounds or something.
Right.
Because
Like, and like, is that on me or is that in the whiskey? Like, what happened?
Right. Well, I mean, you have to run into that a ton, because a huge part of what you have to do is constantly monitor as best possible where as many barrels as possible in your portfolio stand on a rotating basis. I mean, you kind of have to you have to know where things are happening.
And that's part of why, so like all the releases I've done so far have been kind of one-offs, like with Bottled and Bond, I went out of my way to be like, this is seasonal, this is this distilling season, and like make sure that people understood that like it's not going to be repeated next year, right? Because I didn't feel well enough that I understood our barrels well enough at that time to be able to make any kind of promises about what they were going to look like a year from now, or 3 years from now. So like with Bottled and Bond, I really leaned into that. I was like, this is seasonal. It happens once a year. I blend it. They're similar, right? Like, because I'm a good enough blender that can make them close. They should, if you liked the first one, you should like the second one, like the third one, but they're not the exact same whiskey, which is a whole other level of complexity. So I'm not coming out with one that I'm promising repeatability on until this will be the first year, and that took me a few years to get to that place, to feel like I understood them well enough to be able to make any kind of like, not only do I think this whiskey is good, but I have some degree of confidence that I can keep delivering it over some period of time, Which one are you sipping on now?
This is good. This is what Pat has hams. Joe and I
don't even have one yet. I only have ham signage. I've yet to crack open a hams today.
Pat hasn't. Pat wasn't able. Pat has had to do it remote. He got stuck out at the house. So Joe and I are enjoying the whiskey.
Yeah, we hadn't opened it yet, and then my wife's car broke down yesterday, so I'm stuck at the house today. Yeah.
It was
also,
a 15.
I'm getting
text
brutal, messages for sausage barrels now.
Yeah, right.
Truth.
Michael had a question. Will your visitor center be open on more days besides Friday to Sunday soon? I'm passing through in mid-May and would love to stop by.
We are looking at adding Thursdays. We should be keeping the website pretty up to date. So things are starting to open up. So we are looking at expanding that, but I don't think we have a committed date yet. If he wants to message the distillery, you guys know how to get in touch with me. I can connect him with someone to find out. But our website should be pretty up to date.
Okay, good. So have you said you just got, and I don't know how many people were in early when we were just chatting, but you were vaccinated. I know that you deservedly so have been prominently featured this month for National Women's Month. So
yes, it's the 1 month a year when everyone discovers that we exist.
Right. Well, right. Yeah, there's a little bit of that, right? But hey, at least, but it's not that you don't matter the other 11 months of the year, but it is, you know what I mean? but it's nice. Sure. So what have you been doing around that? What kind of engagement? How many have you had? A lot of people chasing you down to talk to you, or?
Yes, everyone, because suddenly they're like, hey, you're a lady, you present us with lady parts, can we talk about that? I try and be at least a little bit selective about which ones I say yes to, so that I don't spend an entire Zoom call talking about what is it like to be a woman in this industry? Well, I don't know. I've never been a man in this industry, so it's tough to compare, but here's what I think.
Right. So you choose the non-pandering ones.
I typically try. Unless it's like too important, and then I just have to suck it up. Which happens. Right. I'm not that big of a deal yet. Sometimes you have to do it even if you don't want to.
So a couple questions. You had mentioned earlier the what are the Hollow Moon Hollow?
Cascade Moon.
Cascade Hollow.
That's close.
Yes.
That's close. Now, so far, those have only been to a couple select states,
Yes.
not named Illinois.
It's true.
Do you think you would see that program expanding at all in the future?
I, in fact, do think that. I, in fact, feel pretty confident of that. And I would not be at all shocked if there's a meeting about that for you guys within the next couple months. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
You know, hint, hint, yes. No, I think the first two for me were just sort of testing, like, does this work? You know, because it's a real, it's a real departure. You know, like, as you know, I'm an independent minded person, but I still work for like a giant spirits company. So it took a second to like get this off the ground of like, hey, I might be able to go off on kind of my own and do some like weird stuff, and that'll be fine. And like, I promise I won't break anything. And so now, you know, we've done the first two.
At the world's largest drinks company. Yeah, you're turning an aircraft carrier at that point.
Yeah, it's like, they're like, oh, I don't know. Like, we have a process, you know, I'm not sure. It'll be fine, I promise. And the first two like went well. So I think now they're going to let me like stretch out a little bit.
If they manage to churn out a new Captain Morgan, like an ice cream flavored Captain Morgan every 3 months or something, they should just let you bottle these things.
They work
whenever
on
you
all
want.
of those for like 2 years, you know, like it's a long process. And, you know, I'm just like, I want to have an inspiration and then like have it in a bottle like 6 months later, you know? So that was a big ask. So we had to like,
that's fair.
Prove that out. And so now, and also like, hey, I can do things that are maybe a little bit weird. And like, actually there is no like testing data to support that the market wants this. And I can't like point to Nielsen ratings to say that it's, you know, like maybe it's okay if it's never going to be a million case brand because it's interesting, you know, and fun and like expressive. I think people are a little signed on to that now. So they're going to be weird ones, right? Like that's the whole idea. It's going to be like slightly interesting, weird ones. And then maybe it'll build into something more.
But it also advertises the versatility. I mean, it speaks to the versatility of the distillery.
I hope so. And that's kind of what I was wanting to point people at, you know, like we're an amazing distillery that's been quietly doing amazing things for a really long time and like things that you didn't expect.
So can we get Cascade Hollow back?
The red label one? Do you want it back?
Sure. No, I'm kidding. I was just looking through, I was just sort of tracking timeline through the system and it came up as one of our inactive items. It's like, oh yeah, I remember Cascade Hollow. What was that? That was really super young, right?
Yeah, I think so. I might be speaking a little out of turn here because of course I wasn't there, but I think there was like supply issues on some of the older stuff. And so it was like a new whiskey it was like a blend of old and young. And some people, I've heard really mixed things. Some people are like, I loved it. Where did it go? And then other people were like, that was awful. Why did you do that?
I want to say it was around right after the white label dropped the age statement and just became 12 from
I think you're correct.
Well, 2012 until...
Did the white label ever have an age statement?
It did when I first started working at Binny's.
Yes.
This would have been like 13 years ago.
What was the age statement?
12 years.
12.
It was?
Yeah.
I thought it was always
In
a
fact,
recipe number.
We didn't, or well, there's your issue. That is the number 12 could have been confused for a 12-year.
Maybe.
And personally, it drives me nutty. And I wish I could take the numbers off of both of them because I think it confuses people. Because
we do use and obviously that's changed to number 8 and number 12.
Yeah. Though I still do what you do. I call them the black label, the white label.
Right.
Because I think it's less confusing for people, but I didn't know. I thought that it was always, they were both just recipe numbers. And I didn't think that they were ever age statements, really.
We'll have to look now. That it also could have been a mistake in the way we had it listed in our
You
system.
might be educating me. I'm very curious now. I'm going to like email my archivist to dig it out.
Dickel 12. Let's see.
All right. Yeah. When you really want answers, you got to get an archivist involved. That's
right. Don't you guys have some whiskey nerds on this right now? Like someone who's going to Google furiously and then be like, give me all the details while we're on this call.
By the way, the single barrel tastes amazing.
Oh, thank you. Which one are you sipping on? Do you know?
I don't. How can you tell with the label here?
Did you see the sample label, or do you have just the bottle?
I've got just the
finished bottle. Oh,
the big bottle.
oh, you're sipping on the 15-year. Lucky you.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty.
You.
What a tough day
So
at work.
here,
Really tough day at work.
unattributable,
15-year-old whiskey.
Unattributable, but from September 9th, 2019, the internet says that Dickel number 12 is aged between 6 and 8 years.
That sounds about right.
But
it
probably
at
didn't
that
have
time.
an age statement on it, though, right? I think it probably was.
There's
the recipe
and
number.
the Dickel 12, so Dickel 12 year actually yields no results.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. I didn't think it was ever a real age statement. I can tell you the average age of it has kind of creeped upwards over the last decade. And specifically, there's some reasonably old, 14, 15-year-old liquid in the 12 right now.
Sure.
Kind of, and you can kind of tell when you taste it, right? That that body and complexity.
Right.
Like that.
It's a notably
finish.
mature whiskey. And, for the price of admission, it's a phenomenal value.
I couldn't agree with you more.
In 2017, Easy Drinking said that Dickel was aged at least 4 years.
Right. Yeah, that is.
And in 2014, the Whiskey Judge claimed that Dickel 12 was aged 8 years.
It's just you hit exactly my challenge.
Yeah.
I think people might be confused, and I feel bad about that, and I'm trying to straighten it out without utterly destroying the tradition of this beautiful heritage brand that I have inherited.
There's a balancing act.
Yes.
Nicole, Peter would like to know if you can give him some suggestions on higher proof Dickel products that you think customers who really like a complex flavor profile would love.
It's actually, that's an interesting question. So the 15, both the single barrel programs, we do have proofs that are above 100. There's a limit on what we have, right? Partly because of that low entry proof I talked about. So the fact that we go in at 115, and because we have those single story warehouses, we're never going to get those 140s, that you see. That's just the way that our maturation is. That is highly unlikely to occur. We might get some eventually out of the palletized warehouses. So I'll be watching that to see maybe if we get those later. But in terms of delivering on complexity, I think I would say maybe some of our lower proof offerings would surprise you. I think, people have calibrated their tastes and expectations to what they've seen out of the big commercial distilleries and kind of built expectations around that. But our conditions are a little different. It went into barrel a little different, and I would say maybe with a little bit more complexity because of this balancing act of both distillation and charcoal mellowing that we have, plus the lower entry proof, which allows things to get to these really high ages without, I think, just tasting like chewing on a baseball bat. I think these lower proofs might surprise your expectations of, what a 90 proof whiskey could be like. With 15 years, under their belt. Although the proof is low, I think a lot of them pack a pretty big punch from a complexity perspective. So I would encourage you maybe to give them a try because it might surprise you.
Yeah, I would agree. The single barrels that we've picked, just this last round we picked, were pretty impressive barrels. I mean, I would check out any of the single barrels first, whether they are hand picks or these distillery offerings, because the value is incredible and the quality of the whiskey is shocking at times. It's really good. It stands up shoulder to shoulder with anything else.
There was a
of
2.5
course, the next
year
bottle of
age.
Bond is coming as well.
Oh,
All
nice.
right. Yeah, the barrels, I think there was a 2.5 year age range between the youngest and the oldest once we sorted out. And we actually, I think, ended up leaning towards the ones that were slightly younger.
That's what I mean. People ask all the time, what are some kind of generalizations you can make about proof or age? And, I think those are real, but the scatter chart is so scattered that there's always going to be so many barrels that defy those expectations entirely. So it's really hard to come up with any kind of truism of this age is going to be like this, because that's the whole thing about a single barrel program. You're seeing the variety. If I dumped them all into a tank, you could probably make some generalizations, but I didn't do that.
Right. And as an addendum to the whole single barrel conversation, just so everybody knows, we do these blind.
Mhm.
We have a number and that's it. It is Dickel, A, B, C, X, Y, Z. And then
Yeah.
we decide and do the reveal after we've picked what we think is the best. So,
which is absolutely the right way to do it. Even the best, you're what you expect to smell is what you will smell. So it's important to do things blind.
Cool. So those barrels we just picked, what do you think the turnaround time is on that? Like 8 weeks or something for us to see those probably?
Probably. Yeah. About. Yeah. I would say we have it down pretty good now.
Yeah, especially if they're already bottled too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool.
That's the idea. Doing my best over here, and like we're keeping them coming. So I'm bottling more starting next week. When we're done with the dumping the bottle and bond.
Nice.
What you should do is get some pictures of yourself standing in front of the bottling line going, been working all night.
Yeah, right. No one would disbelieve that at all. No, I don't think I want people to see me like what I actually do, which is stand next to the bottling line and be like, that looks great. That looks great, guys. Like,
Hey, an encouraging word is good quality.
No, when we're dumping bottled and bond, I'm basically just standing next to them like, is it excellent? Like the samples were really good. Like, are the barrels like that? And I'm constantly like pulling samples out of the tank, and they're like, would you just calm down?
Right. And it's not done yet. So whatever you do,
right.
whatever
like,
you do is not going to taste
need
like what's
to
going to be in
tasting
here.
it like throughout the whole process. Like, what am I going to do? But I like to think that they, share my joy.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of a distiller. It's interesting if people don't, that's kind of a distiller's mindset, right? Because to a certain extent, because we were able a couple of weeks ago, a friend of mine and I went out and helped Dan Farber distill a batch of brandy. And that's one of the first things we learned, which we had never sat for something to where the nature of what's coming off the still changes so much. And the part of the distillate that you like the best isn't what the whole thing tastes like, because that's not what the whole thing tastes like.
Right.
And it's kind of fascinating to watch that curve, and then try to, an experience, I suppose, right? I mean, what you're thinking about as your batches are coming through, experience tells you that each of these pieces, if they're hitting correctly, is going to provide what you want.
Yeah, it's like, so in distillation, that's the difference between like batch versus continuous, right? Whereas like, so at Dickel, like when we're working on a new innovation liquid, I typically am expecting it to sort of instantaneously hit the character that I'm aiming for, because we run continuous distillation. So it's not curved in the same way where there's like a start and a heads cut and a finish and a tails cut, because we're constantly feeding new beer and constantly taking off distillate and constantly taking off bottoms products. So you actually should have a reasonable expectation of finding like that sweet spot, but there's always a little bit of variability, like things, they kind of hover around. So you're typically are also sort of checking the tank to be like, how where's the tank leveling out right now? And it actually can be a little bit more, it's harder to predict, because you have to be like, how many hours was it like this, where it was like super fruity? Like, how much do I have to balance it out? Because things can bounce around a little bit. So that's different. But then it's the same in dumping. Like when you're dumping maturate, for safety, you tend to empty the top of the rick first. So like what you see coming down is like, tends to be sort of in like reverse order of levels. So it's like you see 6 and then 5 and then 4, and then it goes down. So you have to not panic when the first ones are dumped and it doesn't taste the way that you thought, because that like the lower ricks are coming. So you have to not panic.
Right. That's
even
good.
though I
mean,
do
I
every
think
time
that's
anyways. I'm like, oh my God. And then open a bunch
Well,
of barrels and then nose them and be like, oh, okay, it's fine.
Of course. And I mean, you know what? And I'm glad you said that and described that, because I think a lot of people look at a product, especially a product with some level of volume, and don't understand what exactly is required to get that consistency.
It's so hard, actually.
And
it's
how
so hard.
much of it.
Consistency is hard.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's impressive. It's why it's important for people to understand that it's not easy. Right.
And I think there's less of it than they think. Like even brands that you think are super consistent, if you lined up different bottles that you bought over the course of like multiple years, I think you might be surprised at how much variation you see
Sure.
actually. And, you know, even for us, like, I think it's very hard. Like at a certain scale, it becomes easier, right? Because you're just dumping enough barrels at one time that
Right.
individual barrels, individual lots, those sort of individual variations matter less to the whole, you know, like
Right.
you dumping thousands of barrels and whatever was weird is not going to be noticeable ultimately because it'll be so diluted. And like, so there is a certain tipping point scale where I think it becomes easier to achieve consistency, but it's hard. I would say anything under like the 500,000 case mark is pretty hard.
Wow. No, that's interesting. Just because we saw it, 500,000 case. Well, we actually, I mean, the references is a sister facility in your booming spirits company, a Thrusk. We were actually at when a Thrusk was dumping to do a Johnny Walker Black Label bottling. And that's the scale you're talking about. I mean, they were unloading semis of barrels and dumping them into cisterns to just like hundreds blended together to get tankered off.
But even so, Johnny Walker is different, right? Because of course that's a blend of multiple distilleries and like multiple different liquid characters. So in fact, that's not just like a bulk liquid of massive scale. It's actually quite a consciously constructed blend of different things. Like I'm envisioning, you know, like if I just dumped everything that was 4 years old at Dickel and I just did that every year at scale, it would probably be relatively consistent without a ton of intervention on my part, you know, like, but then if you add complexity of like multiple distilleries or multiple different ages or different component parts that are smaller, and like every time you add a piece of complexity, like you're adding something that can go like a little off, and then you have to compensate for that somehow and be able to predict it somehow. Like, so it gets harder.
Yeah.
And of course, in saying that, probably I'll get to that scale and be like, oh my God, you massively underestimated the complexity of this. Like, what was wrong with you?
So much for the law of big numbers.
From where I'm sitting, it seems easier.
All right.
That's good.
Anything else you want to kind of add about single barrels and stuff? I mean, I don't want to take too much of your time tonight.
I would just say open your mind. You know, I think a lot of people who think that they know Tennessee whiskey, who think they know George Dickel, who think they know what single barrel programs should be like, who think they know what 15-year-old American whiskey is like it. I considered myself a pretty uber whiskey nerd before I took this job. And what I found in our warehouses has really surprised me. So, and I've learned some things and it's upended some of what I thought was true. So I guess I would just say like, open your mind a little bit and maybe be surprised.
Mm-hmm. All right, cool.
Great. So what do you have cooking for the rest of the night?
Well, tonight I have a horse show tomorrow, so I've got to get ready for that. And I've got some barrel samples I need to check on. Not a whole lot.
Okay. Well, that's fun. Are you riding or walking? So you're riding on something. Okay.
Riding. Yes. I have a horse show. But hopefully we'll talk again when I have some exciting things coming your way that I'm dying to be able to tell you about.
Well, we are happy to catch up sooner rather than later. Because unlike most people, we'll talk to you 12 months of the year.
That's true.
Because you're great at what you do, not because of any other extraneous factor that has nothing to do with your ability to work. So
well, then I'll see.
Hey, we have one last question here from Peter. Wants to know what flavors he should expect from the 15-year. Joe and Brett, what are you guys getting on that thing?
Well, Joe, and you a more gracious. Joe will give a very gracious.
I like this a lot. I think initially when I first poured it in the glass, it did have some of that waxed fruit character you were talking about, but it's totally blown off as I've sat in here, and it's kind of increased with kind of the baked apple toffee. Seemed to jump out a little bit with me, and then a nice underpinning of some of the oak spice really rounds it out. So it's a pretty complex whiskey, and I think that goes for all your whiskeys. I've had some. I wanted to ask a question too about the Lincoln County process, because I think I've had some Dickel that was produced, or at least something produced at Dickel that wasn't Lincoln County, and I was wondering if there's a if there's some things that are maybe coming out that aren't like that, or they're all going to be Lincoln County or not?
Yes, there will be.
Well, when should we talk to you again in April?
Probably towards the end.
Okay, so maybe let's
we can talk privately around then, and then maybe we could talk publicly like in the summer.
Okay, let's
publicly.
let's
I can say that that's some of my favorite whiskey that I've had over the last several years. So that's exciting.
Well,
very exciting.
then I'll have to pull a sample for you maybe in between then and now.
Sweet.
Yeah. Well, still and then under the undercurrent is everything that Joe said. What I would add to that is what you, again, youthful for 15. There is this really rich sort of cacao, dark chocolate, sort of tobacco in the middle and the back of the mouth.
I love when that shows up. I love some of them. I love when that shows up. I love those. It's like a leathery, almost like, I love that. It smells like a tack room. I love that. That when you add a little bit of water, but you gotta like it, but then it really comes out.
Yeah, no, well, it's in at least the bottle that Joe and I are trying out of. It's definitely
delicious.
So.
Sounds like you guys picked a good one. Well done.
So it's not going to be in the office.
Well, you picked a good one
on Monday, Pat.
Yeah, I'll try it on Monday. Friends who have joined us, these are going to go fast. So if you're interested in these, if for some reason you didn't get one before we tasted them together today, you should probably get into a Binny's and get one soon because these are.
Yeah, we've sold two thirds of what we got is gone in just a week.
That's amazing. Oh my God, that's so exciting. Well, I swear we're working hard to try and get more as soon as it's reasonably possible.
Excellent.
It's a sort of slow bottling pace. It's really the dump. It's like dump one, proof it down, measure it, make sure the proof is correct. The bottling is actually pretty fast. It's the fastidiousness of the dumping and proofing and all those things, like to do a true single barrel program. So I really appreciate that you appreciate it.
Hopefully at some point we can pick a 15-year-old for us down there or something.
I would love that.
It's one of the few distilleries in the area I probably haven't been to yet. So
it's gorgeous. Please do come visit.
All right. Well, thank you, Nicole. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Brett and I will be back on Monday with Copper and Kings Distiller and our continuing American Brandy series. Brandon O'Daniel, was that his last name?
Joe,
Brandon
you went to
something.
high school with them.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
No way.
Well, we're talking to him Monday, and
Brandon's
then on
fantastic.
Wednesday
Amazing,
we'll be back with Busker Irish whiskey from the Royal Oak Distillery.
Right,
So,
Woody and Laura.
Yep.
Laura, their master blender. Woody, their longest tenured employee still at Royal Oak Distillery.
he's their Brett. Yeah.
Right.
Resident old crank.
You
All
guys
right. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us. Have a good weekend. Go Loyola, and we'll talk to everybody on Monday. Cheers, everyone.
All right. Thanks,
you,
Nicole.
Thanks.
Thank you.
See you next time.
Bye.